He came limping through the rain, bleeding, broken, and dragging a backpack behind him. Not a man, not a cop, but a dog. A German shepherd, soaked to the bone, his paw pads raw and torn from miles of running. His left ear was half gone, his side was torn open, and yet he didn't stop. Not until he reached the doors of the Willow Creek Police Department. The security camp caught it all. At 2:04 a.m., in the middle of a thunderstorm, with the kind of wind that tore shingles from rooftops and sent branches flying like knives, the automatic doors whooshed open, and he walked in, dragging death behind him, and a secret no one saw coming. "Jesus," muttered Deputy Wyatt Sanders, spilling his coffee onto the desk as the bloodied dog staggered forward. He reached for his sidearm on instinct, but the dog didn't growl, didn't bark. Instead, he dropped the heavy blood-streaked backpack at Wyatt's feet and slumped to the floor, panting, watching, waiting. Wyatt's partner, Jill Monroe, crouched down slowly. "Easy, boy, what the hell?" The dog didn't flinch, didn't move. Only his eyes shifted toward the bag, a quiet nudge of the nose. Wyatt unzipped it slowly. Inside, wrapped in a torn emergency blanket, lay a baby. 2 months old at most, barely breathing. One dog, one baby, no explanation. "What the hell is this?" Jill whispered, already grabbing the baby and calling for EMTs. The child's skin was cold, lips pale. No ID, no bottle. Just a single hospital bracelet with a smudged name and a date of birth. The baby let out a faint whimper, alive but barely. Jill's eyes went back to the dog. "Where did you come from, boy?" On his harness were faded letters, Canine Echo. And beneath that, a torn-off military patch. No unit, no badge number, just Echo. He had collapsed by the time animal control arrived. The vet was called in immediately. The dog had a deep puncture wound on his side, multiple cracked ribs, and dehydration so severe they weren't sure he'd make it through the hour. But even unconscious, Echo never let go of the backpack. They had to sedate him again just to remove it. Wyatt stood staring at the security footage on loop. A dog dragging a baby into the station like it was the most natural thing in the world. No hesitation, no signs of panic. Like he'd done it before, like he'd been trained for this. If this story has your heart pounding and your curiosity wide awake, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Heroes for Animals, where we share real and inspired tales of loyalty, mystery, and four-legged heroism that'll keep you coming back for more. Back in the station, Rachel Monroe, Jill's sister and a detective on leave, arrived within the hour. She wasn't supposed to be working, not since the incident. But when Jill sent her the photo, she couldn't look away. "It's Echo," Rachel whispered as she stood over the unconscious dog at the Willow Creek Vet Hospital. Her fingers trembled as she traced the scar just below his collarbone, the same place she remembered from a photo years ago. "I thought he died in Kandahar." Dr. Miller raised a brow. "You know this dog?" Rachel nodded, her voice dry as dust. "I trained him. Back in 2019, she and Echo had served together in a classified military canine unit. Echo had been one of the few dogs capable of high-risk extraction missions, silent search and rescue operations in enemy territory. Rachel had overseen training. Echo belonged to Lieutenant Megan Hartley. But they'd all been told Echo died with her in a failed operation overseas. Except no one ever found Megan's body, and now here Echo was, 3 years later, dragging a baby into a rural police station. Rachel sat beside his cage, watching him breathe shallowly under sedation. "This doesn't make sense," she said, mostly to herself. "If Echo's alive, then someone lied." Jill arrived with updates. The baby's stable. No records matched the name on the bracelet. No parents reported missing. No active Amber Alert. Rachel stood. "Run a DNA test. I want to know where that baby came from, and I want Echo's chip scanned." Jill nodded. "Already did. It pinged something weird. A military server. Access denied. We'll need high-level clearance." Rachel stared out the window into the storm. Someone wanted this baby dead, but Echo didn't let it happen. Hours later, the baby was transferred to St. Jude's Medical Center under protective custody. Echo remained in critical condition. But at 3:17 p.m., his eyes flickered open. Rachel was there. "Hey, soldier," she whispered. He didn't growl, didn't panic. Instead, he gently nudged her hand with his nose. The call came at 3:19 p.m., untraceable, scrambled. A distorted voice. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Rachel froze. "Who is this?" "That dog was supposed to be dead. And the baby? She's not yours to save." The line went dead. She stared at the phone, Then at Echo, "You brought her to the only place left where someone might listen," she whispered. "You trusted the wrong people once, but not this time." Thunder rumbled outside again, softer now. Echo blinked. He understood. Rachel Monroe stood still in the sterile hallway of Willow Creek Vet Hospital, arms crossed, boots damp from the storm that had finally rolled away. Her eyes didn't leave the observation window where Echo lay under close watch. The dog was resting now, hooked to IV fluids, his chest rising with shallow determination. He looked old, older than 3 years. And yet, there was a presence to him, resolute, weathered, noble, like a soldier who never came home but kept marching. The lab results came in first. The baby had no matching birth certificate, no missing persons report, no social security number. But the DNA, that didn't lie. Matched 50% to a deceased soldier, Lieutenant Megan Hartley. Rachel read the name twice. It was like opening a casket she thought had been buried long ago. Megan had been more than a fellow officer. She'd been a confidant, a believer, a woman who used to leave notes in Rachel's locker that read, "We don't break, we bend like oak." But Megan had died during Operation Copper Sunlight. At least, that's what command had told them. Her body never recovered, just presumed dead in a line item on a closed report. Rachel clenched her jaw. You don't presume dead someone who just vanished. She drove out to her parents' cabin outside town, off the grid. She needed quiet. Echo needed it too. The vet released him under her supervision, and though his movements were sluggish and his stitches fresh, he insisted on walking into the cabin on his own 4 legs. No leash, no command. He knew the place. She noticed it in the way his tail shifted, slow, unsure, then certain. He padded to the back of the cabin toward an old storage room, sniffed the door, scratched once. Rachel opened it. Inside was dust, boxes, and, oddly, a folded military-issue blanket. Not hers, not her dad's. She knelt down, brushing off the edge of the blanket. Beneath it, taped to the floorboards, was a flash drive. Echo sat beside her, eyes forward. Rachel swallowed. "You're not done telling me your story, are you?" Back at the station, Jill Monroe paced in front of a board covered in sticky notes, maps, and Echo's intake report. Wyatt looked up from his computer. "You're not going to believe this." She turned. "Try me." The hospital bracelet? Traced back to a private clinic in Montana. Shut down last year. Guess who signed the discharge papers for a female infant born there? Who? Wyatt slid the screen toward her. Lieutenant Megan Hartley, signature verified. At 3:45 p.m., Rachel plugged the flash drive into her encrypted laptop. The screen went black for a moment, then a low-resolution video began to play. The image was grainy, the angle poor, like someone had set the camera on a dirt shelf. A woman stepped into frame, holding a newborn. Her face was gaunt, eyes haunted, still beautiful. "Megan," Rachel whispered. In the video, Megan whispered, "If this reaches anyone I trust, it means I didn't make it. This is my daughter. Her name is..." The audio cut. Static. Then, "He's not who they think. He found out about the leak. He came after us. The base isn't safe. They used the Echo to track me down. But I reprogrammed his pathing. He'll only go to someone he trusts." Rachel's hands trembled. "Rachel, if you're seeing this, help her. Protect her. The man who did this, he's not done." Then the video cut out. That night, Rachel sat outside with Echo curled at her feet. "You remember her," she said softly. "You brought her here because you knew I'd find that video, that I wouldn't give up on her." Echo didn't lift his head, but his eyes blinked once, deliberate, trusting. She reached over and scratched behind his ear. "Don't worry, soldier. We finished what she started." The next morning, Rachel filed for emergency custody of the baby through a military connection in the VA network. It wouldn't last, but it gave her time. Meanwhile, she followed the last ping from Echo's collar. It hadn't been random. The chip had been dormant for 3 years, until the moment he entered the station. The signal led her to a stretch of forest land 40 miles outside of town. No roads, no maps, just one faint logging trail. Echo followed beside her, limping but relentless. An hour into the hike, Echo stopped. His ears perked. He sniffed the wind and veered off trail. Rachel followed. 10 minutes later, they reached it. A shack. No bigger than a garden shed, camouflaged under netting and branches. Inside, ration packs, a crate of unopened baby formula, a worn flannel shirt draped over a chair, and a photo tacked to the wall. Rachel stepped closer. It was a picture of Megan and the baby, standing outside what looked like a hospital tent. Pinned next to it was a photo of a man in uniform. The face was partially burned away, but the tag read, Colonel James Vardell. Rachel's blood ran cold. James Vardell had been her CO, Megan's superior, now retired and running private military contracts out of D.C. She'd trusted him once. He'd recruited both her and Megan into Copper Sunlight. Back at the station, Jill was already digging. Vardell's name's been tied to a dozen black-budget operations, mostly ghost missions. No paperwork, all sealed. Rachel added, and now he's cleaning up the last piece, Megan's daughter. Echo growled, soft, low, but directed right at the laptop screen showing Vardell's blurry photo. Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll get him. That night, someone broke into Rachel's cabin. She and Echo weren't there. They'd taken shelter at the firehouse downtown after Echo sensed something off. But the next morning they found the front door kicked in. The flash drive? Gone. The laptop? Smashed. The baby formula? Scattered. But something was left behind. A bullet casing, inscribed with 3 letters, JV. Rachel's hands shook as she picked it up. Not from fear, from fury. He was warning her, but he'd just made a mistake. He'd underestimated a woman trained to follow blood trails. And he'd forgotten one thing. K9 Echo wasn't just a dog. He was a soldier. And now he had backup. There's a kind of silence that only happens at dawn, right before the world remembers to breathe again. And on the morning after the break-in, that silence was shattered by the soft scrape of claws against old hardwood. Echo paced the perimeter of Rachel Monroe's parents' cabin like a soldier back on watch. His body was still healing, bruised, stitched, and sore, but his instincts hadn't dulled. If anything, the break-in had sharpened them. Rachel sat on the steps of the porch, her coffee cooling in her hands. She watched him, his form shadowed in early light, limping slightly but deliberate, methodical. The same way he used to patrol the fob perimeter in Kandahar. Can't turn it off, can you? She murmured. Echo paused mid-step, looked back at her. One ear perked, the other torn from whatever battle had almost ended him. His amber eyes held something fierce, something unyielding, and yet there was sadness in them too. A kind of haunted loyalty. Rachel hadn't slept. Not much. She'd spent most of the night going over the flash drive in her head, or what had been on it before someone erased all proof of it ever existing. But the memory was still sharp. Megan's voice, the baby in her arms, the fear she'd tried to mask. And the name that still burned in Rachel's mind like a live wire, Colonel James Vardell. Jill called just after 7 a.m. We got something, she said over the speaker. Surveillance footage from the gas station 2 miles up from your cabin, a black SUV parked out front at 3:06 a.m., matching plates to a rental company in Virginia. Let me guess, Rachel muttered. No driver ID, fake name, untraceable credit card. Bingo? Rachel glanced down at Echo, who was now sitting alert beside her boots. We're not dealing with amateurs. No, Jill agreed. You're dealing with ghosts. After feeding the baby, now affectionately nicknamed Bean by the nurses at St. Jude's, Rachel drove back into town with Echo riding shotgun, his head resting on the window frame. Every now and then, his nose twitched, tracking something beyond human senses. Rachel glanced at him. You smell him, don't you? Whoever was at the cabin. Echo didn't move, but his tail gave one single thump. They stopped at an old training field outside of Willow Creek. Decades ago, it was used to prep officers and their dogs. Now it was nothing but an overgrown lot filled with rusting obstacle courses, tire jumps, and a buried scent grid. Rachel stepped out and held up a worn leather pouch, one of Megan's. Inside, a scrap of her old uniform and a glove. Echo's eyes narrowed the moment she opened it. Find her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Echo shot forward, a little slower than in his prime, but with the precision and drive of a dog still on mission. He followed a zigzag pattern across the scent grid, past the wooden A-frame, over the old seesaw, straight to the fence line. And then he stopped, nose to the ground, tail stiff, his body trembling, not from pain, but from memory. Rachel walked over. You've been here before. He whined low, pressed his paw to a patch of disturbed earth. Rachel dropped to her knees. She dug with her hands until her fingers hit metal. An ammo canister. Inside, a small encrypted notebook, a USB drive, and a Polaroid photo. Megan, pregnant, sitting with Echo at her feet, her face sun-kissed, smiling, tired. The date on the photo? March 17th, 22. 3 months after the military had listed her as dead. Back at the precinct, Jill analyzed the contents of the notebook. Coordinates, dates, supply caches, and cryptic notes like, Camp Sparrow burned. Trust no one beyond the 6. E knows the backup route. Rachel stared at the initials. E. Echo, Jill asked. Maybe there's someone else. Wyatt chimed in from the corner. The drive is encrypted with two-factor biometric locks. It'll take time. Rachel nodded. We don't have time, not if Vardell's still out there. Jill hesitated. What if he's not working alone? Rachel looked up. Then we'll take them all down. That night, Rachel took Echo back to the cabin. She laid out a blanket beside the fireplace, and for the first time in days, he slept through the night. No pacing, no growling, no nightmares. She, on the other hand, barely closed her eyes. Her dreams were a tangle of blood, sand, and Megan's voice whispering, Echo knows the way. The next morning brought news, and none of it good. The baby's chart had been flagged. Someone posing as a federal agent had requested custody transfer, had all the correct signatures. Paperwork looked legitimate, but it wasn't. They're closing in, Jill warned. We need to move her. Rachel hung up and immediately grabbed her keys. We're going to Montana. Echo perked up from the corner. Rachel looked at him. You knew we'd end up there, didn't you? They drove through the night, Echo in the back seat, Rachel gripping the wheel like it was the last thing holding her together. The closer they got to the old clinic in Montana, the more the air seemed to shift. Heavier, quieter, like the whole landscape was holding its breath. They reached the burned remains of the clinic just before sunrise. Nothing but ash, warped beams, and silence. Echo stepped out of the vehicle and walked directly into the ruins. He circled once, sniffed, then started to dig. Rachel helped, their hands, paws, and fingers clearing away debris. Then metal. A lockbox. Inside, a torn piece of Megan's field uniform and a folded note in plastic. Rachel opened it. If Echo made it here, then I didn't. Tell her I loved her and that I chose to run, not for myself, for the child, for truth. Signed, M.H. Rachel closed her eyes. The wind picked up around her. And in that moment, she didn't feel anger, not loss, not vengeance. She felt clarity. This was never about escape, she said softly to Echo. It was about justice. Echo pressed his forehead gently to her knee, not like a dog, but like a comrade. She smiled. Let's go finish what Megan started. The road to truth was never a straight one. And for Rachel Monroe, it now wound through burned-out structures, hidden coordinates, and the eyes of a boy who'd already survived more than most soldiers ever would. She watched Echo in the rearview mirror as they left Montana behind. He sat tall despite the pain still in his legs, head high, gaze steady, loyal, stoic, driven. He never once looked away from the road ahead. Rachel took a deep breath. You were trained to find the enemy. Let's go meet him. Back in Willow Creek, Jill and Wyatt had been busy. A paper trail had emerged, one carefully scrubbed, buried beneath layers of government blackouts, military jargon, and private contractor aliases. But it was there. Colonel James Vardell hadn't just disappeared after his retirement. He was the founder and CEO of Raven Corps, a shadowy private security firm specializing in risk mitigation. Translation, high-risk, off-the-books operations that skirted just outside the lines of legality. And Megan? She had filed a complaint 6 months before her death. Unsurprisingly, it had vanished from official records. But Jill found a backup copy. Listen to this, she told Rachel over the encrypted line. Megan accused Vardell of diverting humanitarian aid during Operation Copper Sunlight and using the chaos to cover up illegal weapons testing in civilian zones. Rachel's blood ran cold. And she had proof? She did, enough to threaten his career. She thought he'd kill her. That's why she went dark. That's why she ran. Rachel looked out the motel window at Echo lying near the bed, curled around the baby's blanket like it was gold. She wasn't wrong, she whispered. By nightfall, Rachel and Echo were heading toward Vardell's last known address, an estate tucked into the Colorado foothills, registered under a shell company with links to Raven Corps. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress. Perimeter fences, security cameras, motion-activated lights. But Echo wasn't fazed. Rachel crouched beside him in the tall grass under moonlight. You've done this before, huh? He gave a quiet grunt. That look again, disciplined, courageous, but never reckless. She checked her gear, body cam, phone on silent, small handgun tucked under her jacket. No backup, no badge. This was off the books now. Echo crept forward, silent as fog. They approached the outer wall from the east, where the cameras had a 4-second dead zone between rotations. 4 seconds was all Echo needed. He darted, slid under the fence through a space someone had once carved out with bolt cutters. Rachel followed, barely. They reached the rear deck. Lights off, no movement. Until a figure stepped out from the shadows. Older, gray hair cropped close, dressed in tactical black. Colonel James Vardell. Rachel froze. But before she could speak, Echo let out a low snarl. Vardell didn't flinch. He smiled. I was wondering how long it would take for you to find me. Rachel stood, gun in hand, but lowered. You killed Megan Hartley. Vardell raised an eyebrow. She chose to disappear. I simply made sure she stayed that way. Echo growled louder now, muscles coiled. One more step, and he'd lunge. Rachel's voice shook, not from fear, but fury. You tried to take her child. You sent someone to break into my home. No, Vardell said calmly. I sent someone to retrieve stolen military property. He gestured behind him. Come in, let's talk like professionals. Rachel didn't move. We're not the same kind of professional, Colonel. He sighed. You think you're protecting some noble truth? Let me guess. Megan told you I was the villain. She didn't need to. Your bullet casing did the talking. Vardell smiled thinly. A warning, not a threat. But since we're being candid, what now? You gonna arrest me? March into court with a stray dog and a baby with no birth certificate? Rachel kept her gun raised. No, I'm gonna expose you. She hit the body cam live stream button. A soft beep, streaming directly to Jill. Vardell's expression didn't change, but his hand twitched. And then it happened fast. A second man stepped out from the house, armed. Echo launched. The dog hit the man mid-step, jaws clamping down on his arm before he could raise his weapon. They went down hard. Gunshots cracked through the night. Rachel dropped behind the grill cover, fired 2 rounds. Vardell ran. Echo snarled, pushing off the injured guard. Rachel sprinted after Vardell around the side of the house, heart pounding. They reached the driveway just as Vardell climbed into a black SUV. Rachel shouted, "Don't you move!" But he floored the gas. Echo, bleeding now, charged. He leapt, hit the door, but missed. The SUV peeled away into the night. Echo collapsed in the gravel. Rachel ran to him. No, Echo, stay with me. You did good. You hear me? You did good. He whimpered. His chest heaved. But he was alive. By morning, Vardell was gone. But the footage had already gone viral. Jill had pushed it live. The audio, the confession, the baby, Echo's attack, the whole thing. Congressional aides were already making calls. Journalists descended like hawks. And Rachel? She stayed beside Echo, who now rested at the Willow Creek vet, sedated but stable. The clinic had renamed a room for him, the Echo Suite. The baby was safe, relocated to a protected foster system until formal custody could be arranged. Rachel stared out the clinic window, exhausted but unwavering. We're not done, she told Echo. Not yet. Later that night, she recorded a short video posted to Heroes for Animals. In it, she said, this isn't just about one soldier or one dog. It's about loyalty, about fighting for what's right, even when it hurts, even when it costs everything. Megan trusted Echo. Echo trusted me. And now I'm asking all of you to trust the truth. This story isn't over. The morning after the standoff at Vardell's estate felt unreal. For the first time in days, Rachel Monroe woke up without the sound of rain, gunfire, or breaking news alerts. Just silence and the rhythmic hum of life support machines at the Willow Creek Vet Clinic. Echo lay curled in the corner of the quiet medical room, sedated but not still. Even unconscious, his paws twitched, his muscles trembled. Somewhere in that dream, he was still working, still tracking, still protecting. Rachel sat beside him, her fingers curled loosely around the tag on his collar. K9 Echo, unit number 137. No dog left behind. No dog, she thought. And no truth either. The footage of the confrontation with Vardell had done its damage. National outlets picked it up. Military watchdogs demanded investigations. Politicians began distancing themselves from Ravencore. But Vardell, he'd vanished again, disappeared like a ghost, and time was running out. Rachel stood, walked to the counter, and studied the latest set of documents Jill had faxed from D.C. Satellite imagery, truck manifests, and one big red flag. Unregistered aircraft seen departing from a private airstrip 45 miles outside Boulder, registered to a dummy corporation linked to Ravencore. The timestamp? Just 6 hours after the fight. Rachel left the clinic with a purpose. She stopped by her house to grab the encrypted notebook Echo had led her to in Part 3, the one with Megan's coordinates and field codes. A few pages had once seemed nonsensical, codes like E24, Delta Home, and Return Point Sierra. But Rachel had been in special ops, and she'd seen that structure before. These weren't location markers. They were escape routes, backup paths. If Megan had survived, she would have had one last emergency fallback, off-grid, untraceable, even to the military. And Echo, despite the blood and broken bones, had brought Rachel almost all the way there. She returned to the vet to check on him. His organs are stable, the vet said, but he's not bouncing back like before. There's significant internal scar tissue. This isn't just about this mission. He's been fighting too long. Rachel crouched down beside him. Echo's eyes opened, just barely. She smiled. You stubborn old warhorse. He blinked. Slow, a tiny thump of his tail. She placed a hand on his shoulder. One last push, okay? You made me a promise, Echo. You said you'd protect her. She meant the baby. But in that moment, Echo wasn't just a dog. He was a witness, a survivor. The final living thread to a woman who had tried to do the right thing and been punished for it. Rachel loaded Echo gently into the truck bed, lined with a thick mat surrounded by blankets and soft barricades. He didn't make a sound the whole ride. He just stared forward, alert. They drove for 3 hours across winding roads until the pavement gave way to gravel and gravel gave way to dirt. The GPS stopped working 10 miles from their destination. Rachel didn't need it. The notebook's codes referenced an old Forest Service map from 1982. It led her to a canyon trail long since removed from public access. And there, hidden behind a wall of scrub pine, was a nearly invisible dirt path, just wide enough for one vehicle. At the end of it, an old missile silo. Of course, Rachel whispered. Megan, you brilliant paranoid genius. The silo door was rusted, partially sealed, but someone had been here recently. Fresh tire tracks. Rachel helped Echo down from the truck. He stood just barely. Stay here, she said, though she knew he wouldn't listen. And he didn't. Step by step, he followed her into the darkness. The inside of the silo had been repurposed. Part shelter, part field lab. Emergency rations lined one shelf. There were stacks of maps, radio equipment, even a solar-powered battery bank. And a crib, empty, clean. Rachel's breath caught. A photograph sat on the table. Megan, holding her baby. And behind her, a man, alive. Rachel picked it up. Her heart thudded. The man wasn't Vardell. It was Caleb Ross, an Army intelligence officer who had disappeared 2 years ago after filing whistleblower complaints against Raven Corps. Everyone assumed he'd been killed, but now she knew. He'd gone underground with Megan. On the floor was a burnt document, half readable. If this goes wrong, we regroup at Delta Point Sierra. Trust Echo. He knows the way. Rachel will come. She always comes. Rachel sat down, the weight of it all collapsing into her chest. Megan had never given up. She hadn't just saved her baby. She had tried to save the truth. A sound echoed behind her. Rachel turned, gun raised. But it wasn't Vardell. It was Echo, pawing gently at a corner of the wall. She walked over. Behind a false panel, she found another box. Inside, an encrypted flash drive, a printed confession, and Megan's journal. The final pieces. She read the last entry written in pencil. If you find this, then Echo did what no man could. He stayed. He endured. And if Rachel's with him, tell her I'm proud, not because she found me, but because she'd never stopped believing I was worth finding. Tears slipped down Rachel's cheeks. She looked at Echo. His body trembled from exhaustion. You brought me home, she whispered. You brought her home. He let out a quiet breath, then rested his head on the floor. She stayed with him all night. The next morning, Jill arrived by chopper. They flew out with the evidence, the flash drive, the journals, the photos, a full report exposing every illegal operation Megan had uncovered and the people who helped her run. The story would break within days. Raven Corps was finished. Vardell was now the most hunted man in America. And Echo? He was stable. But the vet warned, he may not have long. His body's tired, his heart's strong, but he's been carrying this burden too long. Rachel held his face in her hands one evening and said, if you want to let go, you can. I've got her now. I'll carry her the rest of the way. He blinked, then licked her wrist. Once, the national broadcast aired 3 days after the team recovered Megan's journal and evidence from the silo. By then, the storm had already started. Every major outlet ran the story. Whistleblower soldier presumed dead exposes military black ops conspiracy. K9 dog, the unexpected hero. It wasn't the headline Rachel would have chosen, but she didn't care about the headlines. She only cared that people finally knew the truth. Raven Corps was dismantled. A full federal investigation was launched into every operation Colonel James Vardell had touched. The leaked footage of Rachel and Echo confronting him on his estate had sparked public outrage. But it was Megan's journal that made Congress move. Handwritten entries, timelines, names, coordinates of the buried civilians in Afghanistan. Her voice was quiet, precise, and unflinching on every page. A voice silenced too long. Rachel sat on the porch swing of her parents' farmhouse, watching the sun dip low over the cornfields. The world felt quieter now, not because it was over, but because Echo was sleeping peacefully at her feet. He hadn't moved much since the trip back from Colorado. He was thinner, slower, but still present, still watching, still hers. The baby, Megan's daughter, had officially been placed under Rachel's temporary custody. The courts moved faster than usual, given the circumstances. They named the baby Aria Hartley Monroe. Monroe for where she would grow. Hartley so she'd never forget where she came from. Rachel had stood in the courthouse with Echo by her side, one hand on Aria's tiny back, the other gently resting on Echo's head. The judge smiled as he signed the order. "She's lucky to have you," he'd said. "No," Rachel replied softly. "I'm lucky to have them." 2 weeks passed. Then came the call. FBI had tracked Vardell to a private airstrip in New Mexico. He was trying to charter an unlisted jet out of the country. Rachel didn't hesitate. She flew out the same night, taking Echo with her, against the vet's advice, against her own better judgment. But he knew. She could see it in his eyes as he limped toward the plane. This was the end of the road, and he wanted to see it through. The FBI team let her join the raid. It wasn't official, but they owed her. The airstrip was nearly empty, save for the idling plane, a silver SUV, and Vardell himself still in uniform. Like a man who couldn't stop pretending he hadn't become the villain. Rachel stepped out of the vehicle. Vardell froze, then smiled. "You again," he said. She raised her badge. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, obstruction of justice, and the illegal use of federal resources." He held up his hands mockingly. "You forgot betrayal." Rachel didn't blink. "That one's personal." And then Vardell reached behind him. "Quick!" Too quick. A gun. Shouts from FBI agents. Someone yelled, "Down!" Rachel ducked. But before she could fire, Echo moved. He leapt, one final time, the same way he had always done, without hesitation, without thought for himself. He hit Vardell center mass. The shot went wild. And in that moment, the last piece of the puzzle locked into place. When it was over, Vardell lay face down, disarmed and restrained. But Echo didn't move. Rachel dropped to her knees. "No, no, 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 Echo, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open. Soft, clear. Rachel cradled his head. "You did it. You finished the mission. You saved her. You saved me." His breath was slow, then slower, then still. The funeral happened 3 days later. Police, military, civilians, they all came. The town's veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with local farmers, dog handlers, school teachers, and kids who'd never known Echo but had heard about him. Rachel wore her uniform. She carried Aria in her arms. A flag was folded. A plaque unveiled. On it. Canine Echo, no dog left behind. He carried the truth when no one else could. A month passed. Rachel resumed part-time duty at the station. But her days were now split between paperwork, long walks with Aria in the park, and visits to the statue in the town square. Echo, immortalized in bronze, mid-stride, backpack in his jaws. She often brought Aria there. Let her tiny fingers trace the edge of the statue's paw. "You never met him," Rachel would whisper, "but he carried you all the way home." One evening, she found something at her front door. No note, no name, just a package. Inside, a photo. Grainy, old. Megan and Caleb Ross, Aria's father, alive, together, smiling in the shadows of a forest cabin. On the back, written in black ink, "We're safe, we'll find you when it's time." Rachel felt tears blur the edges of her vision. Echo had given his life for more than justice. He'd given it for family. And Rachel? She'd make sure his legacy lived on, not in medals or headlines, but in Aria's footsteps, and in every truth she chose never to stay silent about again. Thank you for following Echo's journey through war zones, conspiracies, loss, and ultimately, love. He was more than a dog. He was a soldier, a protector, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest hearts carry the greatest courage. If this were your mission, would you have finished it like Echo did, or would you have stopped at the edge of danger? What does loyalty look like to you?